Hello, and welcome to What the Denmark, the show that explains things that seem peculiar as an outsider in Denmark. I'm Sam.
And I'm Josefine. Each episode will discuss a new topic, talk to experts, and try to understand why something so normal in Denmark is confusing to foreigners. Despite living abroad for many years, I'll be giving the inside view of Danish culture.
And as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm originally from the UK, and so we'll be giving the outsider view of the country. Our ultimate goal is to resolve cultural confusion in Denmark. This show is just one part of that mission, and so stick around to the end to hear about how you too can be involved.
Welcome to the second part of our look at friendships in Denmark.
If you haven't already, you might enjoy listening to part one, where we talk about the theory behind why, in general, Danes like to keep a small number of close friends, and what this can feel like for non-Danes.
In this episode, Sam and I talk about the practicalities of how to make friends, including heartwarming advice from a Brazilian-Danish pair who've become great friends.
Josefine and I get started by picking up the conversation on the topic of networking. So I spoke with a girl called Ana Sofia, who's a student from Portugal. Her big tip was to this idea of networking. So especially being a student, she would basically say, go to as many events as possible. And she defined networking as basically what we've been talking about as an acquaintance. So somebody who you know, but you don't necessarily have to meet them for a coffee every time.
My advice would be just for people to be very open-minded and to network, regardless of whether you're going to be as friends with that person or if you just want to have their contact in case you need it.
And her big tip when it came to networking is that once you connect with somebody, never actually say goodbye.
If I add them on Facebook, I will try to make sure to be an active friend and either like their posts or comment, or if eventually very rarely, most likely, just send them a text, hey, how are you? And if not, in that case, for me, it has always been people have reached out to me, and whenever I reached out to them. So because I never completely lose contact with someone, or at least I try not to.
I like that tip, but I think right now, basically, expats have to do way too much to break into Danish culture. I'm very much aware of that. And I hope a lot of Danes will listen to this because they're not really aware how difficult it is. And I think most Danes actually really, really would love to be hospitable. They would really like to invite people in, but they don't see it. They don't realize that people feel lonely. They can't make friends. So if we manage to spread the word, so to speak, then I actually think a lot of Danes, they would be very happy to commit more.
Totally. The more that people from different backgrounds can speak with each other and have a space to do it, I think the better. And if we can help in fostering that, that's fantastic.
Exactly. And I mean, for a Dane, also having foreign friendships or friendships with expats could be a huge thing. Also in terms of you learning language, but, engaging with new cultures.
Well, I think that there's this fascinating study. Mark Granavetter, a sociology professor at Stanford University in 1973, published a paper called The Strength of Weak Ties. People who are in your network but aren't close friends are a great source of new information and ideas compared to strong tie friendships. Seeing familiar faces has been shown to buoy people's moods. It's a great way to get job opportunities as well as a nice thing to do. So you get to know someone without the expectation that you have to meet them for a coffee every 3 weeks. So I thought this was really interesting to sort of demonstrate or sort of clarify that yes, obviously there are lots of benefits of having these really deep relationships, but there are actually benefits of having these weak tie friendships where, as I say, there's not the expectation that you're going to be, this person's going to come to your wedding, but you can have enough of a chat to them and this idea, new sources of information, new connections. I think it's a study, especially in Denmark, lots of jobs are made through networking. And so just actually getting to know this person who's at the school gate or who's at your office, there might actually be quite some things that could come from that.
But I think that the networking circles are also quite small in Denmark. They're very much based around the relations you had at universities, through your work. And the difficult thing as a foreigner is to come in and maybe engage with colleagues through your new job and feel that you get to know each other quite well and you start thinking they're your friends.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, people still see you as a colleague and you might not be invited around to their house because there is an invisible border between workspace and private space in Denmark. So it doesn't tend to blur. So basically, your network at work is one thing, but it doesn't translate into friendships at home.
Well, I think I agree 90% of the time. I do have one. We mentioned the Danish and the Brazilian couple.
It can happen.
It can happen. So tell you what, let's just have a little listen to the lovely story of Camilla and Emilia. So actually, Gookie, who is one of the researchers on What the Denmark, reached out to Camilla and Emilia after reading an article on the local.dk, an English-speaking website in Denmark. I went and met them both for a coffee one afternoon in Copenhagen, and I must say, interviewing the two of them was a bit like talking to two teenagers in love. They would often finish each other's sentences and be gushing about how lucky they were to have found each other. Once we got settled in, I asked if they could start from the beginning.
Yes. I looked across the room. Our eyes met suddenly. There she was.
It was a rainy Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly.
Camilla had recently started working at MobilePay, a Danish finance company. And after overhearing some conversations where Emilia was speaking, she felt compelled to join in.
I think we hit it off really quickly because we both like weird
stuff,
geeky stuff. Okay. Like just all kinds of theoretical stuff, and we both have a little bit of a research background, so I think that also helped. That, yeah.
And I think that for us it was kind of like an Elsa moment of let it go.
Because exactly.
We were in the finance industry, so you don't talk about Shakespeare or black hole theory with everybody when you're in the finance industry. So when you finally find someone who has those interests and you can share a lot, it was like, oh my God, I feel so free. And then I remember telling my husband, like, oh my God, I just met this girl and we're talking about this and that, and it was so amazing. I finally feel that that I'm starting to fit in and so on. So that's how it.
Yeah, and I felt the same. Yeah. As Camilla said, it was really kind of like this instant bonding in like that creative, intellectual, like, when you have really quirky conversations about weird stuff.
And suddenly someone else is just like...
And someone gets it, and then you're kind of like, oh my God, someone else gets it.
With this strong connection, they began chatting more, every day in the office, and it soon transitioned to being friends outside of work. A big step in the friendship was the ability to find small, informal times in the week where they could meet up.
And I think that's one thing that Danish people might not always be so good at that I can recommend, which is, so again, our walks. It's a really nice concept in that a walk can last for 15 minutes. It can be just a way to get home. It can be we stop up and have a coffee. It can be we go and have a dinner for like 3 hours. So it's more, one of the things that I think Danish people sometimes are not so good at is it's either you go all in and it's a full dinner and you meet with friends and it's a big production and everything. Like having those little casual interactions of drinking coffee, walking home, it's where it's 30-minute or 45-minute. Like I think that's why people maybe find friendships difficult, because they become like these massive commitments.
When I asked them both about what advice they would have for Danes and non-Danes making friends, they took an almost philosophical approach. Both of them said that they came to this friendship seeing each other as a human being, rather than all the stereotypes that can be bound up in being a Brazilian or a Dane.
I think that we were both interested in understanding each other's universes. Once you can see people, as people, I think that the other things, they do become kind of secondary. And then that other person becomes someone who can actually teach you so much about aspects from, culture and society and so on.
Yeah, I think Camilla's totally right. And I know it maybe sounds like a banal thing, but it's a letting your ego fall and meeting the other person as a person.
Emilia had this really nice sentiment that we closed on.
The problem is that we all meet each other with all of these kind of assumptions and preconceived perceptions, and if you're meeting the world that way, you're probably going to get your reality validated. But if you have the courage to kind of not meet the world that way and kind of go, I wonder who this, even when you're old, and even when you like you've tried it a lot of times, that you still meet the world and wonder, who is this person? And I wonder with curiosity. I think that opens up the door for a real friendship.
And I have told that to Emilie many times, but I mean, I have a Danish husband and I have been working in Denmark, but until I met her, I never felt home. So, her friendship has brought me this feeling of belonging, finally, and I just hope that other people can get the same.
Quite good, isn't it?
Yeah, so it is possible to meet good friends at work. And I think that spontaneity they talk about is wonderful. And it is the one thing I missed terribly from living abroad. I'm quite a spontaneous person myself. And I love the idea of just calling a friend and saying, "Do you have a glass of red wine? Let's go for a walk." And I did find, as a Dane myself, but a Dane who's lived abroad for many years, that when I came back, no one had time for me because they were literally booked for the next 3 months in their diaries for those big events and for their dinners and all of that. So there was no space for me. So I had very few friends, maybe 2 or 3, who had time to just be spontaneous with me. And
were they international friends? Or were they also Dane?
A mix. There were some Danes that were just spontaneous types, and I think they were also maybe thinking, "Oh, it's Josefine. I mean, that's just the way she is." Because I am actually not able to book my diary 3 months ahead because I'll be stressed thinking about all the things that are planned for me. I prefer engaging spontaneously, and that way I don't have my whole life planned, and that gives me a freedom to engage with what's around me at the time. But that's very un-Danish. And I love what they're mentioning here. Of course, there should be room for also having your nice dinner party to plan your life, but having few sort of breathing spaces where you can engage in that way is wonderful.
Yeah, and I just, this idea of it can just be a 15-minute walk, or it can just be a quick chat. And because I often find this as well, like when you're sort of going through, you're like, gosh, okay, I've got 3 evenings a week or whatever, and suddenly these engagements start filling up, and it's like, okay, actually, maybe I'll finish work early and I'll just cycle over to your place and we'll have a cup of coffee, and then I'll head off to this other engagement or something where it becomes less of a big thing.
Exactly, and you are not going to organize your diary around a 15-minute walk. So you would never call someone and say, "Should we do a 15-minute walk in 3 months' time? Because that's where I have a spot in my diary." No, it's the sort of thing you need to do in a spontaneous way. And I have to say that I've found that to an extent in my local little neighborhood. There are neighbors who are, doing their gardens. We live by the sea, so you'd go swimming and so on. And there you can engage in a more spontaneous way because it's your local little environment. But bringing that out into the more general sphere, the work sphere, the spaces where you meet new people, that's where we don't excel, us Danes.
One thing that I think is good for us to talk about is thinking about what are some strategies for people new to Denmark to actually get friends. So we sort of set the scene. So Danes typically like a small number of very close friends. Often there'll be years of history. Don't necessarily have lots of space for new friends. So I thought it would be interesting to sort of talk about some ideas of how to break in and how to actually make friends with a Dane. So again, for this one, we did a bit of research. So there is a very good website called howtoliveindenmark.com by an American lady who's been here for 20 years. And her number one tip is find Danes who didn't grow up in the city that you moved to. And this goes back, I think, to your point of having school friends. So if you are moving to Aarhus, find people who didn't grow up in Aarhus.
You want people from Copenhagen.
Yeah.
If you go to Aarhus, which is in West Denmark, in Jutland. And if you go to Copenhagen, you need to find all of the people from Fyn and from Jutland in that city.
All the non-Copenhagen, because the Copenhageners will likely still have their friends and family relationships, which I'll have to go to. So I thought that was a really good one. There's the classics of get a hobby, go to a club.
Yeah, that was what I would suggest as well. But even so, you tend to then have some social engagement there. But moving into the private sphere still is so difficult.
It's tricky. Similar thing, volunteering. It's quite good. So doing something where you've got this common purpose and it's a bit like working, but maybe it's sort of, now that it's more in your sort of time off, your non-core time, maybe that's another time to develop it. I find it personally very difficult to get to the stage of how can I put it, asking someone out on a first date, in terms of getting to that stage of can we go for a beer, or can we go for a coffee? And what I found really useful is I've been able to get some introductions to people who, a friend of a friend who can vouch for me to not be a weirdo. So they basically
you freak.
Yeah. So I basically said to my friends, hi guys, but just I moved to Copenhagen. Do you know anyone who's quite cool who lives there? And a few of my friends said, oh yeah, I know someone. And they kind of put me in touch. And so if we've got this common friend, and maybe it's not even a friend, it could be even an acquaintance, but hi Martin. My friend Sam just moved to Copenhagen. It's quite new to the city. Would you mind just going for a beer with him? And getting to that point of, okay, we're actually going to sit down for 2 hours and have a beer. That's when it's me and Martin seem pretty friendly. Now let's actually go off and we're on the path to becoming a friend. So it would be really difficult, I think, for me and Martin to get to that point where we could sit down for a beer, but being able to have somebody, a common friend, introduce you to get you to that stage has been really useful to sort of get over that first step.
I think those are very good strategies for sure. And then there are the other expats. I think it's worth engaging with the other expats, because just having a good space where you can hang out with other people while you slowly merge into Danish culture is probably what's going to keep you sane. And then look for the Danes who've lived abroad, because they always make much more of an effort inviting people in. And I certainly do that myself, because I'm also aware that it can be really difficult when you come from abroad. And I have been so lucky to enjoy the hospitality of all of the wonderful people I've met abroad. And without them, I don't know how I would have enjoyed being abroad for so many years, because they have been incredible. They've invited me along to so many special occasions. They are some of my most important friends.
Mm-hmm. And I think, totally right. And I think when somebody has had that experience living abroad, there's almost that empathy of, okay, well, I don't know this guy that well, but he seems all right. Maybe I'll do this slightly non-Danish thing of inviting him for beers with a few of these other friends that I'm meeting so that he can meet them too. Or maybe we are doing this trip, or we were going kayaking. Oh, let's maybe bring Sam along as well. And it won't necessarily feel natural, but it's a way which will, help other people.
Yeah, and I think it also comes from a kind of gratitude from the way you've been received in other places. Yeah. So I think a lot of people, they are exceptionally grateful for the way they were brought into people's homes, the way they were received when they went abroad. So definitely look for Danes who have some foreign background.
The only issue I found with this is a lot of my friends who are Danes who have international experience are also quite open to the idea of living abroad again.
So they might disappear again.
So, oh no, I've got to.
You don't want to lose them. But I think also those Danes, they have friendship circles. And then, as you say, they might invite you out kayaking or something. The other thing I think works quite well. And now I have an English husband myself who obviously feels like you, that sometimes they basically ruin the intimate circle by speaking English, and then suddenly everyone else is speaking English because they want to be inclusive, but yet you don't have that very cozy space you're otherwise having just with your very close friends speaking your language. Organizing some things yourself and inviting any Danes you might know to it. So, for example, it could be a wine tasting. Danes love wine. It could be a meal from your home country. So you organize an English roast or something like that. And you invite some of the maybe Danish acquaintances or someone you know, not very well, but that you've met somewhere, invite them. And the moment you've invited them into your space, I bet you that most Danes, they would really like to invite you back. It might take 3 months because of their diary. So don't, be offended by that because it's just fitting people in. And it really is difficult when you get into that whole Danish way that, your diary is completely full and you try to have a little bit of breathing space, but it's difficult to find room for those quick and spontaneous engagements.
Is it basically when it comes to the calendar, you just need to play the game and you just need to be, if somebody comes back and says, look, let's meet up in 2 months, you just need to accept, okay, this is not them buffing me off. They still might like me, but it's just the practicalities of the calendar.
It's probably a huge compliment because, they probably pushed you in between a lot of engagements and otherwise you would have had to wait for half a year.
Yes. That sounds very good.
So we've now talked about that friendships are possible if you're open-minded, for Danes to maybe try to be a little bit more spontaneous because actually it can open up for great friendships and opportunities to learn about the world. But we've also talked about how important it is that Danes are maybe more aware of how they can help engage people coming from abroad in their lives.
Exactly. I think that then the big thing that I've taken away from this is, yes, having deep, meaningful friendships and relationships is a virtue and something which should be encouraged. But there is this sort of, it doesn't have to be so binary. And I feel there can be this sort of slightly more blend or hybrid where you can continue to get benefits from seeing people and having more people in your life without it, disrupting that cozy feeling.
Yeah, and as a foreigner, maybe you think about what is your national dish. Invite some Danes along. They will actually really love that. And that's engaging in a very Danish way around the table. And you may well find that you're invited back.
Totally. Maybe even bring a beer from your own country. That might even go down better.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks to everyone who has helped in the creation of this episode, including David Dolyak, Kuki Gunas Shivali, Reke Campbell, Andreas Poulsen, Kevin Most, and Tevin Sudi.
We hope you enjoyed the show. We're still early in our journey of resolving cultural confusion in Denmark and would love for you to join us by subscribing to the show on your podcast app. If you like this episode, please consider telling a friend about it, and you can also head over to www.whatthedenmark.com to receive our newsletter. Thanks for listening. I'm Josefine Volkvarts.
And I'm Sam Floy. Can you maybe help me on this? Is it Emilia? Is it E-M?
Emilie.
Emilia.
Think about it, at the end.
Je.
Emilie.
Emilia. Okay.